Mikey, Mayur, thank you very much for joining the AWS for Data podcast. Mikey, let me start with you. What do you do at the MONY Group?
Hey Sandy, well first of all thank you for having me here today. So my role at MONY Group is Chief Technology Officer, and I look after effectively our consumer facing brand. So all of the customer facing technology falls under my control. But for those who are not familiar with MONY Group, we effectively have three main brands. The first being a leading price comparison website called MONY Supermarket. So most people be familiar for coming to us for your home insurance or your car insurance every day. We also work closely with Martin Lewis on Money Saving Expert, which is a leading editorial financial website. And we also look after Quidco, which is a new addition to the group back in 2021, which is obviously a cashback site where you can make the most of your retail purchases online and get some cash back in your own pocket.
Nice. I use Money Supermarket a lot. My wife is an avid user of Quidco. She tries to keep me disciplined as well, which I try to, but she uses it all the time and she loves it.
People love it, yeah. I mean, honestly, you can really gamify. You can make so many savings. It's absolutely incredible.
Absolutely. So Mayur, for our viewers, do you want to introduce yourself and your role in AWS?
Sure. For our viewers, my name is Mayur Udernani. I am a generative AI and machine learning specialist at AWS based in London. And I work very closely with Sandy on the data strategy side, but essentially my role encompasses working with our financial services and insurance customers very closely to accelerate them on their journey to Gen AI and get value out of the use cases they are implementing.
Nice. Thank you, Mayur. Mikey, working with businesses, I know that successful implementation of data and AI strategy is a journey. It takes time to evolve. What has MONY Group's journey been with data and AI?
We set out a data vision probably with one of my colleagues, Matt Cresswell, our CDO, back around 3-4 years ago, and we've been on a journey of transforming our data capabilities over that time. And we work very closely together around what that looks like. But data is like such a core part of our strategy. If you look at the strategy on our website, we call it out as one of our key enablers for the things that we do. And obviously, if you think about our customers as well, they come to us and they willingly share very private, very sensitive information around the credit file, the medical conditions, like their salary, probably stuff that you wouldn't even tell your best friend, right? But they come to us and they entrust that data with us. So that's very important to us, and we have to make sure that that's secure, that we have the right governance around it. All of the controls are in place to make sure that the right people can access the right data and that nobody can access something that they shouldn't. For a long time, we've been event-driven as well. So not only do we look at the facts that people give to us, but we also look at the triggers, and this is about real-time processing. So spotting in real time what are customers doing, their behavior, past history that we know about them, affinities to certain brands so that we can start to tailor their experience. But what we've really tried to do when you take a step back is our approach has always been quite simple. We try to keep operational data very close to the teams. And to do that, what we've had is a very decentralized approach to how we manage data, but with central guardrails and central controls around what that data should look like. And then that allows us to keep that data effectively federated out amongst the teams, but we can knit it back together and get a really clear understanding of our customers, what they're doing, and try to predict really good analytics and give us some really good BI around what's happening around our site and try to be more data informed around what we're doing.
Nice. I think the decentralized model of governance is pretty is evolving, and it's quite in trend. I see across different customers who are doing it, especially big organizations, because that is where you can give autonomy to your local teams or the distributed teams who work with different tools or they have got different skills, but also then centralize insights so that you have control and secure the data in one place, which is great. And then that leads to successful implementation of AI, I think. What have you done in the space of AI or generative AI?
Yes, so all of these were obviously the good foundations for us allowing to move into generative AI. One of the good things that we've done recently, so it hasn't been without its teething issues. Obviously, finding the right path for how we're going to leverage it has taken us a little bit of a time for that strategy to emerge. But what we've really tried to do is focus on making sure that customers feel more confident and informed about the decisions that they're making when they come to us. And if you take a step back, most of our brands is about instilling a wider picture around what deals are available to you. So how can we use generative AI to make sure that customers do see more of what that product can do to them? And a good example that we've done recently is we created what we're calling the credit cards insight. So customers come to us and they're looking for a balance transfer card. They maybe got an outstanding debt on the current credit card, or they're just looking for a better deal. We actually use generative AI and all of the data that we know and understand about the customer to create real-time illustrations around the difference that this could make to them if they take this product out, how it can accelerate their debt repayment, what difference this will make to them on a day-to-day basis.
This is interesting, and that means that you have to have really good understanding of your customer, because you're kind of personalizing the responses from the model, right? That's interesting. Mayur, we talk a lot offline about how customers are taking generative AI to production, which has been the talk of the last year, right? So generative AI came up, then everyone started playing with it, people were experimenting, businesses were experimenting as well. And now is the time when we see the successful implementations, like experiments turning into production workloads. You work with financial customers a lot. What have you seen the common patterns behind successful implementation of AI?
I would put probably 3 drivers where I have seen, say, maybe customers who are more successful versus customers who are less. At the topmost bucket, I would say executive vision and sponsorship. Like in the case of MONY Group, within the technology office and the data office, there has been alignment. So executive visioning matters a lot. The second one, and I'm preaching to the converted here, is getting the data foundations in place. And I'm not looking, when I speak to customers, I'm not looking for the perfect data foundation, but an understanding of what your data is, what the strategy is, an execution plan for the strategy, because with generative AI, a lot of the differentiation comes from the data that you put in. And is the data then of the right and acceptable quality for it to make that differentiated result? And the last part is because the technology isn't slowing down. If you see the pace of innovation in generative AI, it's still going very strong. So the ability to be agile, to iterate, to give better versions and give a lower time to market to the product, I think that has been the third biggest driver, the ability to create these sort of decoupled architectures. So when there are things that change or evolve, you could replace that while keeping the rest of the application the same, both from a user standpoint as well as from an administration standpoint. So yeah, to summarize, I would say executive visioning, a good understanding of data and data foundations, and then a level of agility to move fast and keep pace with the technology.
And that's where I think the value of cloud and evolving architecture decisions come in, right? So what I've seen is architectures in the cloud keep changing every 6 months on average, right? Especially with AI, something new comes up, and then you're like, okay, we have to change not only API calls to different models or model upgrades, but with different use cases, you have to widen your grasp on your architecture as well. Mikey, we lightly touched upon your team structure, the decentralized model of governance, working with businesses on data strategy. What I found is the people piece of the puzzle is really, really important. I believe it's more important than technology, right? And how you structure your teams matters a lot on how you succeed with data. I would like to understand from you how you have done that in your organization.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. So we quite often say at MONY Group that it's always 2 parts culture, 1 part tech, the culture being the hardest part to adopt this new technology. But you're also right, like the pace of change is unbelievable. The amount of new frameworks that pop up, like how do you choose the right one? And you're absolutely right around how do you abstract yourselves from this. But the way we're trying to approach this is very similar to what I mentioned around like decentralizing the model. And everyone will be familiar with like a data mesh architecture. And we're trying to enact the very same approach within MONY Group around our agentic approach. So we're looking to effectively create an agentic mesh. So the domain teams that know and understand the product, the customers, how people are using their services, they understand their APIs, they understand how data is formed. What we also want them to do is very similar to like a microservice architecture. We want them to be wrapping their services in these intelligent agents that they can be really close to the customer. And then we effectively can knit all of this together using like orchestration so that we can pull all of these agents together and do something much bigger than we've ever, I suppose, imagined before. It's obviously been bumpy to get to this point, I would say. So a lot of our earlier use cases have been what I would call workflow based. So rather than those domain specific agents that we just mentioned, they're task focused, where we've given like our agent, here's a bunch of tools, this is your job, go off and fulfill this, and here's some golden examples. But for us to move forward and really embrace this new technology, this is about creating more autonomy in our infrastructure, and this is how we're looking to leverage it. But one of the things I am really pushing on teams is exactly as you mentioned, that normal engineering practices still apply. So how do we break things down? How do we abstract things? How do we pull them out of the frameworks and make sure that things that we are creating of value, such as the tools, the prompts, they're all reusable. So as this rate of technology changes, we can adapt and move towards that as well. So, even small things like how we build prompts, let's not go down the route of just chucking all of our prompts and hard coding them in amongst these agents. Let's template them, let's create reusable snippets and make sure that all of this is just composable, just as we would for building any normal software.
Yeah, that's the key word you used there, composable architecture. I think that's what makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of agentic mesh that you're talking about is certainly a pattern that I'm seeing will be very applicable in the near future as agents evolve. You have got specialized agents. How do you catalog them? Where do you keep them? How do you connect them to your data? You need a governance just around the agents themselves, right? So totally agree with that thinking. Mayur, when advising financial services customers on their AI journey, what's your framework of assessing data readiness for AI?
Yeah, I would take a step back, Sandy, to especially when I speak with customers, to underline why data is important, because I'll probably talk about it later as well. Models are important, don't get me wrong, the large language models, the foundation models, but they are all reaching the top right hand of the curve, where the performances and accuracies are kind of clustering closer together. The same model, if your company established 15 years ago or 50 years ago, the same models you have access to, if two college graduates come out and decide to start something new, they have access to exactly the same models. So models are not the differentiator. If anything, models are an equalizer. The differentiator is in the data, which is why data is important. And again, like I said, I don't, when I speak to customers, look for a perfect data plan. I look for a understanding of the data, understanding of the use cases you are going to implement, what data sources those use cases are going to impact. And for that data, for those use cases, is that data governed? Do you have the right data quality? Because data quality has an impact on model performance. More importantly, do you have the right data infrastructure? Because running a proof of concept over 2 weeks is easier. The challenge is when you take it out of proof of concept and put things into production, do you have the right data scalability built in? Do you have the right data infrastructure? Like, you can't run a real-time inference if the data you are using, the operational system runs a batch every week. It makes no sense. So synchronizing that. So From a readiness assessment standpoint, it is more the understanding of the data that is used, where it will drive value, how it will give impact. That is the most important piece when I look at GenAI.
And I see, it's pretty similar to what you would do with a traditional AI project. Like you start with the business problem, look at what data sets align with that problem. What's different with generative AI?
Yeah, the difference is that definition of what is data has changed overnight. So in the old world, if I was talking about ML models and data 4 5 years ago, I was talking about structured tables, about making point predictions around regression models, around classification models. When I speak about data in the last 2 years, every asset that is tangible you have, whether it is a structured data in tables, whether it is unstructured data, whether it is documents that you have stored, whether it is log files, whether they are transcripts, they are images, even marketing videos, everything is data and everything is value driven, so you can drive value out of it. You need to have the right quality and the right versioning and the right control and the right governance on those first.
I think unstructured data is massive with generative AI. Right?
Yeah. Even by size, it's probably 90-10 today in most organizations, in terms of how much unstructured information you have, is how much structured tabular data you have.
And it almost requires a little different strategy than structured data. Like nowadays, we are mostly thinking about, okay, unstructured data, what's the strategy for that? How do you secure it? How do you catalog? And there's so much more to that world of unstructured data, right? It's totally different. So, Mikey, on your AI solution implementation, yes, data is important. We have already established, everyone knows, right? How do you assess whether you're ready on a particular project? How do you assess the data piece in that process?
Good question. But I think, like we've already discussed, for us at MONY Group, we had a great foundation already in place in terms of, self-serve and access to lots of this data. But as you were kind of alluding to, Mayur, that context is king really for making a successful, proof of concept here and getting that out to be production. So, being honest, like I would say that I'm not sure you can prepare yourself for, in all honesty, around what data you need to solve a particular use case. It's definitely been a trial and error thing for us around. The team have figured out what works really well, what different types of data sources to use, how to use, different vector stores, how to use embeddings and push them into the model with the context. How much do you push into the prompt? I would say it's all been a bit like trial by fire, really. So I'm not sure you can ever be truly ready for it, but definitely the data foundations we had put us in a good place to start to capitalize on this new approach for us.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned about data strategy, a good data strategy, is making sure the right people have access to the right data sets at the right time. And it never happens that way in true life. I mean, there's always, there's something that you are missing in terms of data set. But what's important is that have you got that underlying infrastructure to bring new data in quickly when you realize that that's missing, and then start working with that. That cuts down a lot of time in terms of discovery of the project, right? I see data accessibility is a huge issue, right? Not only about users accessing the data, but making the data accessible, like ready with high quality, is something that organizations spend a lot of time on.
One of the key learning as well is don't let it do maths. It's not great at maths. Make sure that you push all of those calculations in.
Yes, absolutely, totally agree. Mayur, the AI field is rapidly evolving. There are new technologies coming out every other day. New models are coming up every other day as well. What are the emerging technologies that you see in the financial services sector in this space?
I would put, if I look at financial services, we are a bit more circumspect as an industry. So if I go back and look at all of 2023, all we did was try different experiments, try different proof of concepts. And if I look at 2024 more with internal use cases and increasingly late 24 and 25 with external customer facing use cases, what we've tried to do. So the big change for me is we're trying to productionize stuff either for our employees internally or for customers externally. And in my mind, there are probably four key drivers as we move towards productionizing system, not running experiments forever. Uh, the first one is, and of course it's obvious, is models. And I say models, not a model, because model choice and model flexibility becomes very important. There are new models, there are distilled versions of existing larger models, smaller models with greater accuracy. So how do we build the decoupling with the models? So we have flexibility to choose the right model for the right use case and the right upgrade at the right time. That's part one. That's a big change I'm seeing. The second one is a function of moving to production is business is asking the right questions about ROI. Where is the return on investment? Which does mean we need to start focusing on costs. We could run the biggest model in experimentation and it works. When we go to production, how do we take some of the newer technologies, and I know Mikey, you mentioned some of them around managing prompts. So prompt caching, for example, do I cache portions of my prompt that helps me save on token pricing? At an experiment level, it is insignificant. You wouldn't want to do that. When you move to production and you are looking to shave costs of a few cents of millions of queries that you would run, you start making sense. How do I manage prompts? How do I version prompts so they are not hard coded? Do I do latency optimized inference? Do I need less latency, quicker response, or can I really run it cheaper as a batch? I don't really need it in real time. And some of these technological innovations are a backdrop to moving to production. They are not experimental considerations. That is second. The third one, and I wouldn't harp about it a lot because we spoke about it a lot, is data. Having the right data, because that is the differentiator, and that has impact on how you run your embeddings, how do you run your vectorizations. We've all been so focused on looking at models and evaluating models. We've not really evaluated, do we have the right knowledge base? Is it providing the right context? Are we evaluating the whole end-to-end cycle rather than just evaluating the prompt and the model? So, and all of that is part of data. The last part I would put in a slightly broader bucket, which is trust. And I don't think it's a choice. As in, trust is a business decision because trust will drive customer adoption. And when I talk about trust in the financial services industry, I mean about some of the basic hygiene things which we've always worried about taking care of, which is security of data and encryption at transit, encryption at rest, making sure that the data we use from our customers is not it does not end up being used to train models, especially with some of the data privacy requirements, but then also coming back and looking at how do we put the right guardrails in beyond just the guardrails that the models provide to protect our customers from toxicity, to prevent bias, to make sure there is more factual information out there which is accurate, especially new technologies like automated reasoning, for example. And the last one is there are industry standards now for how you design, how do you manage the risk, how do you implement AI systems to be more ethical, to be more trustworthy. The closest one I can think of right now is ISO 42001, which came out quite recently, and in some ways it incorporates elements that are already in the EU AI Act as well. So yeah, I'm sorry, it's a long-winded answer to your short question, but four key drivers as we move to productionization and the features therein, which is around data, cost, models, and trust. And then of course there is this huge move towards LLMs do the talk. There are agents. Agents walk the talk. So automating using agent, single agent, multi-agent, agentic workflows. But I'll pause because I know you have a separate question around that.
Yeah, we can't have the podcast without that question, right? No, thank you very much. I totally agree. These are pillars behind what's emerging, right? And Mikey, as the CTO of MONY Group, I'm sure you're at the hot seat of this rapidly evolving space of AI. What are how are you preparing for these emerging technologies?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I really echo a lot of what Mayur just said, where you really have to focus on what the purpose is, because I think a lot of people are driving features that you could probably generate without using generative AI, right? You know, it could just be a more traditional approach to software development, but really finding that use case that works, where you know that there's a good hope of ROI off the back of it. That helps gather momentum, I would say, within the business, and it's really critical to get all of the key stakeholders involved. I would also say that making sure you have a plan. So, you know, we leveraged AWS Bedrock as our system of choice for how we were going to retain our data sovereignty, how we were going to provide controls to make sure that we had the correct governance in place. I would also say a key thing is to make sure you get your risk and compliance team involved early so that they understand what you're trying to do, the direction that you're heading in longer term, so you're not going to them on a use case by use case basis and they've got your longer term aspirational thinking. But in many ways, Bedrock provides these controls and governance out of the box for you. So as you mentioned, we can be sure that we retain our data sovereignty, that our customers' data is not left beyond our control. We can be sure that the data isn't being shared with models for retraining purposes. We've also found a good balance for how much data we actually push into the model ourselves. So we're not sharing too much PII back into the models, just on the off chance. But the big thing really is just making sure that you stay focused on your brand's reputation. So you're putting a lot of trust into something that is not necessarily deterministic, and you're allowing customers to interact with this thing in new ways. So what guardrails are you going to put in place to make sure that your brand reputation stays intact? I think we've all, you know, can point to a few cases where people have looked at like prompt injection attacks and maybe got some of the chatbots to go a little bit off kilter. So all of these things are massively important to us, and really key for making sure that you get that buy-in within your organization.
So when it comes to AI projects, right, or Gen AI stuff that you're building, who do you put these responsibilities on? Have you set up a different team for regulatory? I mean, you said you have risk and compliance team, but they might not have the tech inside. So have you got a cross-functional team set up for this? I'm just interested in understanding how you do it in your business.
Yeah, sure. So back almost 18 months ago, we recognised that this was something that we needed to invest in as a business. So we formed what we called our emerging tech team. And this team, they were tasked with how can we harness and commercialise this new emerging technology. And they're effectively the leaders and the custodians of the projects that we do, the frameworks that we build, and also how we broaden that out into the rest of the organisation so that people can contribute to it. And we've been working really closely from a technical aspect so that we understand what's possible, what's not possible, and how we work with the rest of the business, like our product folk, to understand they know the art of the possible so they can start to bring that into their product infusion thinking. But also our risk and compliance teams, that they're there to make sure that we are doing things according to, you know, what the regulator's looking for. So it's very much a joint effort, very cross-functional, but the key underpinning really has been the central team that has started to harness this technology.
So that's good insight, actually. I did not. It's interesting to know how businesses like set up these teams that work on certain aspect of the whole. I mean, when you look at the generative AI use cases, is at the end of the day, you're querying your data with natural language. That's what happens. But to put it into a commercial setting, especially in a financial services company where you're using like data from customers which are really sensitive, it becomes a very big task, right? It's not that simple. So no, thank you for the insight. Mayur, in the FSI industry, what are the trends you have seen in terms of customers balancing the potential of these technologies with data privacy, trust, governance, compliance, EU AI Act in the Europe?
Yeah, I would say as an industry overall, um, we are heavily regulated. There is a strong compliance function within most organizations. Um, so we are naturally more circumspect when it involves using a lot of data, especially when it is external facing. So if I look at the evolution, we've done more internal use cases focused on agent support, for example, or document processing, for example, that drives operational efficiencies first. And only now, maybe in the last 9-12 months, we started focusing on customer facing use cases, or use cases that involve a lot of customer data after we've established that there are security measures in place, like Mikey spoke about uh, having the escrow so your data doesn't inadvertently end up being used to train a model. So how do you make sure the model you are using is air gapped from the model provider itself? The second one, and again Mikey touched on it slightly beginning, is data sovereignty, especially for specific regions, that data stays within the region, it does not go out of the region. So data sovereignty is important aspect, and most financial services have established boundaries and guidelines around that to make sure that data stays in the region, it is processed in the region, and it is held no longer than it is necessary to use in the prompt to perform the action. Maybe you save some of it for logging, but that has to be within the confines of the organization. Uh, uh, there is also this very strong focus within FSI on making sure we are compliant regulatorily with some of the use cases that we are establishing, especially with the regulations coming up in UK, in EU, in California, in the US. Uh, and the way we've tried to balance it is with building the right privacy controls beyond the model. So models provide you a level of control. How do you drive granular control almost at an API level, like Mikey talked about in the MONY Group with Bedrock, or at an API gateway level, or at a landing zone level, where you build a platform and the platform has the controls that you spoke about to make sure that data privacy is maintained, and then different use cases then get implemented or deployed on the platform, but the platform provides the privacy, data governance features, so individual use cases don't have to.
Okay, that makes sense. Makes sense. Mikey, you talked about, so we talked about your cross-functional team around ensuring trust and privacy compliance with your data and the tech, right? Obviously, we know that regulation kind of slows things down. It's like, dragging things. There is an impression of that, obviously. How do you manage the speed of innovation in this space with the regulatory requirements and the compliance that you need to meet?
Yeah, it's a good question, and something that you always have to balance. And even when you look broader beyond what the regulator is trying to do, they're trying to protect customers, which is obviously key to what we want to do anyway. So our interests are aligned there. I would say, however, we have a really great compliance team. So hi, Matt, if you are watching. And he's been really involved with helping us form these regulations. But as I mentioned, I think Bedrock gives us a lot of comfort that we can be sure around the controls that are in place. The big thing that I think the regulator is catching up on now is this push for transparency. So how do we let the customer know that this is the technology that we're using, how we're using it, what data points are we using to provide this service, how is it going to be retained, as you mentioned, and all of these things are part of how we're driving our customer experience as well. So the customer feels really reassured around our processes as well. And one of the recent experiments that we had was we were experimenting with what's the right question that allows a customer to click into one of these insight projects. And actually, when we added like a transparency marker to help the customer understand how we were using this tool, we actually saw quite a big increase in clicks of people engaging with this. So it does show that there's still an amount of trust that we need to portray into our customers to get them comfortable with using these tools.
Nice. I think that's a nice segue to what we want to talk about. The talk of the town this year is agentic AI. And the reason I see we can get into this topic is, you talked about your customers accessing data, gaining insights on different, data points, especially on your credit card information. How do you see a future where agentic AI can make autonomous decisions on your consumers' financial data, financial behaviors, or actions that they take?
It's a good question, and also $1 million question, right? If I could predict the future, that would be amazing. But I mean, my personal belief is that technically we're probably not that far away from being able to achieve this. This is more about building the trust within the UK population, and even broader than that. Because I often quite refer to that technology is here to make people's lives easier and simpler and free them up to do more of the things that they enjoy. And I think there's a really big opportunity for generative AI to do that. And if I take a real step back and you think about technology advancements over the years, it's humans that have had to adapt to these new technologies. We've had to get used to using the internet, having come from like DOS prompts back in the day. We're now used to using mobile phones and apps, but this is probably the first time where technology adapts to us and understands what we want, and we can communicate it with a way that we understand. So I absolutely see a future where all of these AI ecosystems, they want to be the interface, the thing that orchestrates and controls the systems that we interact with, and allow us to do more things autonomously just through asking it to do something. So yes, I definitely foresee a world where we're going to become much more reliant on these systems, and it will become much more the part of our way of life. I don't know if you're familiar, but there was a really quite famous tweet that went around that said that we've maybe been thinking about AI all wrong, and actually what we should be doing is thinking about AI to do our laundry and dishes, and that we can free ourselves up to do our creative writing and our artistry. But so if you think about the essence of that, it's really about freeing up humans to do the things they enjoy, whether that be laundry itself or creative writing. But I definitely see that these AI ecosystems are paving the way for that. And we want to be part of that, right? So we want to be the brand that interfaces with these AI ecosystems, and we're entrusted because the scope of what they can achieve is way too broad. So they're looking for partners to provide their services and their APIs and their data so that we can all work together as a coherent ecosystem. But yeah, I'm quite interested and quite excited as an engineer to start building out this much more connected world.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is at one point it just becomes a part of the system. I mean, it's already part of the system in many use cases. And then, the consumers just use what they use, but a lot of the background stuff is being handled by agents, which help you maximize your return on investment, reduce costs.
Yeah. I mean, we can already see, right, that younger generations are definitely turning to things like TikTok and ChatGPT over traditional search engines to try and find their answers. So you can definitely see the way that this is heading.
Absolutely. Mayur, agentic AI in financial services, I can foresee challenges in productionizing autonomous agents, especially due to regulations and compliance. What are your predictions in this space, or what have you encountered till now?
I would say that is the next wave. So we will have agents. The question is whether we will have autonomous agents and how many autonomous agents and how much of it is. If I go back and look at a different technology that is probably slightly ahead in the curve, I would probably look at autonomous driving, for example. We didn't start with cars driving autonomously on the street. That's not going to happen with genai either. You're not going to have agents running autonomously doing stuff for us. It will always be an agent assist, where the agents would assist. There are lots of areas when I look at financial services where you can apply agent assist to improve the tasks that has been done. Like one clear area is productivity improvements, operational enhancements. The other is improving customer experience, the amount of time a customer has to wait, for example, to get a response. And I mean both ways. So one way is, if you look at service windows, can we extend service windows from being 8x5 to 24x7 using autonomous agents? If we can do that, that's a fantastic outcome for the customer. The other is even waiting time while being on the call with a human agent. Can a human agent get better information quicker using some of these agents in place? So there are these two levers. Now, if I go specifically industry by industry, and let me take like the top three that might come to mind. If I look at insurance, for example, claims processing or underwriting assistance, why wouldn't I as an underwriter, I would want an assistant, a personal assistant that helps me underwrite faster and quicker. If I look at banking as a sector, then loans processing, mortgage processing. I got my mortgage like 9 years ago. It took a phenomenally long time, right? It takes a lot of time to get mortgage processed. I would love to get it done sooner and get into my first house sooner. Any kind of loan processing, any intelligent document processing, if I can make it more autonomous or more assist. And then if I look at capital markets, for example, pre-trade, there are verifications I need to do from a compliance, from a regulatory standpoint. Getting those checks done automatically. So as a trader, I focus on getting the best trades and taking the best commissions I can get home, making a profitable trade. And then all the paperwork, all the risk management, all the margin management that I do in the mid office and back office, if I could outsource in a way some of the clerical repetitive work to agents who can manage the paperwork and get the risk management in place, provide me with some sort of report saying here is your risk, here is acceptable, here it is not. So there are definitely huge pockets of efficiency drivers within each of the industries. So I'm quite certain agents would come, but not as autonomously driven agents yet, from what I can see, more as assists to help us get some of the work done quicker, improve operational efficiency, improve the customer experience.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think I definitely see that coming, and that's already almost there. 5 years down the line, don't know. I mean, seeing the progress, you might see fully autonomous, but I don't think when you want to commercialize it, you need to have that human in the loop. So you talked about autonomous vehicles. So I was recently in San Francisco and I took the Waymo. I don't know if you had a ride in Waymo. It's the autonomous vehicle taxi service, right? And we took a ride. The consumer experience is great. You don't have a driver and you're surprised for the first time. But it's so seamless. You're not even scared that there is no driver driving the car. But you have, so there was an instance where the car was going round and round in a location, and that's because one of the way out was closed. So I think they did not update the maps, but I could instantly call support, and there was someone taking control of the car remotely, and then they directed the car. So I think that's where in commercial settings, human in the loop becomes really important. So I don't think that's going to go. I think what we need to innovate on is the human interaction with AI. Needs a lot of innovation in that space in terms of how we make that easier and how that comes together.
And how we make it natural for humans. So to the point Mikey made, that we aren't the ones adopting to how to use the machine. The machine is adopting and learning to how we behave and taking cues from our speech and actions.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, talking about challenges, Mikey, what were your biggest challenges when you embarked on this journey of implementing your generative AI solution?
Lots of challenges. But if I had to distill them down to 3 key learning points, I would say the first one is finding the time to learn. So this is a new technology.
Yeah.
We understand how we have to harness it, what works. As you mentioned, we effectively spent a year working on different proof of concepts, looking at what would be the right thing to do. Not all of them made it through to production, but that was still a year of valuable learning, and now we're really trying to drive at pace all of that learning, being able to harness it into something really worthwhile. The other one is hype versus reality. So what can it really do? What's the reality? Obviously we all see very polarizing views on social media, different platforms around where AI is going to take us, where it's not going to take us. But it's really finding out where it's usable and its best use case, because I do believe that there's a huge advantage using this technology, and it's just finding it in the right way and leveraging that within your own company. And then the final one is just having that longer term strategy as well, just making sure that you move forward from just, like independent proof of concepts to actually understanding what direction you're heading in and figuring out how you're going to get there. So what architecture you're going to use, how you're going to prepare for yourselves for the future, abstract yourselves away from all of the different technologies, and try to drive something meaningful off the back of that.
That's really good to hear. I think it quite aligns with what we talk to customers about. Mayur, you can dive deeper into that.
I was going to say the same. I'll stick to the way Mikey mentioned. I'll stick to 3 buckets. Now I need to think about what goes into the 3 buckets. I think one area, and probably MONY Group, it's not been a challenge, but I think executive visioning and support, I see for us, at least for some of the organizations, I see a lack of clarity or knowledge, or a mix of both, on where AI and generative AI can be useful and drive business impact. And there is stuff. So while I tell you the bucket, I'll also probably tell you the resolution, because we've run a lot of executive visioning sessions with our customer executives to evangelize, separate some of the hype from reality, but also some of the fear from reality on what the technology is capable of doing. The second one, and I think that is a substantial challenge, is skills and enablement, and that gets more challenging to the point that by the time you learn something, there is a newer technology or a newer piece that is knocking on your door that you need to learn and relearn. But I think technology and enablement for a lot of our customers is a roadblock. I have seen business users wanting to grow faster, want to go faster with the technology, but having the skills in-house or the right partners who can complement those skills has been a challenge within some of our customers. So we've run hackathons with customers. We do regular boot camps. We even do GenAI launchpad. So if you have a use case, you come into one of those boot camps where we talk about the technologies, and then we have a one-on-one session with you at the end where we try sort out how to solve the use case with the technologies that we've spoken about. And then we have mechanisms like prototyping and the Generative AI Innovation Center, where we work with customers to bring to reality the use cases they have. Or what we're trying to do is upskill our customers in the process. So some of the mechanisms to try and bridge that gap, but skills and enablement, I think, is second. The third one is, and we spoke about data, but also the flip side is the lack of right data foundations or understanding of the data needs that will drive business value and impact for a particular use case. I think that's a challenge with some of the customers, and I know we've been working together with customers to help them grow in maturity from your initial 1 or 2 use cases that you've done prototypes on or you've productionized, how do you then treat your data assets and your model assets in a unified way? How do you see a data to Gen AI unified view, a unified experience both for your users, but also to move forward in maturity from your initial defined use cases to more centralized or decentralized use cases, to optimizing the platforms that you are building? How do you grow up that maturity curve? So yeah, to summarize, I would say those three probably are the key challenges. There are mechanisms in place that we are working with customers to help them on.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that I see, especially with data, is the problem with data is the data management is boring, right? So AI is interesting. You look at use cases, you can implement it readily. It show outcome. You get the dopamine, and you say, oh, something is working. But making sure your data is of high quality, you can have that, having that plumbing of data right to have the right data at the right time is not a one-day task. It's not fast. It needs time to evolve and mature. I think one of the biggest hurdles is bringing teams together to work in a common place on building these data projects, and also unifying the experience of the different formats of data, especially unstructured data in a storage layer, so that you can access. And then having governance around it, bringing your teams, AI engineers, ML engineers, and data engineers together to work on these projects is really important. That's where you basically maximize your ROI, because the boring stuff that you need to do with data, you try to make it easier, right? You try to make it fun to work with, and I think we are doing some work in this space with SageMaker, so which is really interesting. Seeing
It's
customers.
a classical tip of the iceberg problem, no?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to work on the tip, but the 7/8 that is below the
Yes.
surface,
It applies to everything, doesn't it?
Guilty of it sometimes. You know.
Okay, let's talk about interesting stuff. Let's look into the crystal ball, right? And tell me, based on your experience in the industry, Mayur, what will be the game-changing AI applications in financial services over the next few years?
I am very bad at crystal ball gazing, but like some things are apparent because they are on the surface. They are happening. We spoke about agentification, and when I say agentification, I really mean LLMs have been doing the talk. They are good at conversing. LLMs working actually automating tasks that are done now, whether you use a single agent framework or a multi-agent framework or something else, with or without it, it's incidental. But the primary part is I see generative AI focusing more on automation and specialized automation. So agents that are specialized for a particular task and they get better over time. That definitely is happening. uh, the second one is almost a Gen AIification of SaaS. And again, some of it I can see on the surface, because if SaaS has to survive, software as a service has to survive, it has to embed Gen AI as part of the product. If it is not part of the product, then users would go elsewhere and maybe build their own bespoke solution. You lose customers. So I think the second big trend that we are seeing really green shoots of only yet, but would become quite significant, and that's true even for like insurtech and fintech providers, that you would see Gen AI features become more out of the box and more natural as time progresses. And I believe we will see more adoption of Gen AI on the customer experience side and on productivity improvement sides, the two areas that I spoke about earlier, within banks, primarily with a view to drive ROI, either a better retention or a cross sell, or a reduction in cost. That definitely will happen in the near to medium term. Uh, those were the top. I think areas, there is also this threat for financial services specifically. I think there is this threat that if we don't do it, somebody else will eat our lunch. You will have the next insurtech and fintech that does not have the technology debt that we have over the years. That's a neo FI with completely native Gen AI based technology that does something we are not doing. So yes, there are great opportunities for the future, but there is also this challenge or threat, because like I said, models have been a great leveler. The technology has been a great leveler and disruptor as some of the new age companies start coming up. So unless we have bigger financial organizations which have been existing try to use data, and that is my hope, which is the last part, is less of crystal ball gazing, that is more hope, because we have been treating data as a liability for far too long. It's something to be managed. I have to spend my cost to create a lake or a mesh. To think of it as an asset that will help you generate value, help you generate ROI. So what you are putting in is not a cost, it is an investment to unlock some of those use cases.
That makes sense. And totally agree on some of these, especially me working mostly with the software and SaaS businesses. I'm seeing a lot of focus on generative AI features because there is scope. There is a saying that software as a service is turning into service as a software, where you basically automate work and give the outcome to your customers, and a lot of SaaS companies are working on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mikey, let me frame this future question for you. Tell me, what are you seeing in your space in terms of the future technologies or the future of AI in your space, your industry? And then how do you see your role as a CTO changing within this, with these technologies, and what kind of new roles you see coming up in this space as well?
Really good question. But yeah, I mean, I agree, right? I think we are going to see a lot of an insurgency mindset within our different technology sectors coming up. So this is enabling people to think differently and come up with new ways of doing things. I also agree that people are going to expect these features out of the box. You know, we're probably the last generation to grow up without AI as part of our culture, or can remember a point in time where AI wasn't always with us. So I think these features are going to be commonplace and just expected to have all of these insights, all of these like new features out of the box. When we think about what we do within MONY Group, and if we dial all the way back to when we were first incepted, we took a problem where customers had to spend a lot of time phoning up lots of different insurance providers, giving out the same data over and over and again on telephone calls, having repeated conversations. And we took that time and we helped give them a broader view around the products that we're offering to them and whether or not that was a good deal for them. And we think that this is a really good opportunity to take that experience a step further. So how can we free ourselves from the common user interface that everybody's accustomed to, and how can we use this to be more adaptive towards a customer's needs, understand them, and help them find the right product for them, and really help understand their needs. In terms of how my role changes, I mean, that's a good question. So, obviously there's definitely polarizing views around what the future of engineering looks like, but my view is that we're still here to build these experiences. I totally agree that you need a human in the loop still. And I think what will change is engineering. So I don't know what new roles will come up. I've seen lots of new names around like prompt ops. Please let's not call it prompt ops, but I definitely see that there's going to be a new level of skills, a new way of harnessing this technology beyond how we code and build systems today.
Nice. Thank you very much. Thank you both for these fantastic insights. We had a really interesting discussion about AI in financial services, if I tag that so. I think to summarize, the most important points that I've taken from you both is long-term thinking. So think about how your data evolves, your maturity with data to be successful with AI, because that's what matters in terms of productionizing applications. You mentioned about learning, keeping up with the pace of changes, enablement that we do with customers, focus on some of these things, hackathons. And then we talked about regulations and the importance of having this cross-functional teams where you actually involve risk compliance early in the game so that they understand what sort of solution is being developed is really crucial. And of course, data, having the right data strategy, quality, making things easier in terms of working with data projects are important as well. So I think we had a really great discussion. Mikey, if people wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way?
LinkedIn is the best way if you find me. I'm Michael Smith. I use my full title on LinkedIn. But yeah, just look for Michael Smith at MONY Group.
Thank you. Mayur, anything you wanted to add at the end?
No, the only parts, agree with everything you said, but maybe I'll also add agility to it a little bit. So ability to iterate, and yeah, if people want to reach out to me, same as Mikey, can reach me on LinkedIn, Mayur Udernani. There's only one, so not much discrepancy there.
There's lots of Michael Smiths.
All right. Thank you both. We are wrapping up this podcast. Thank you very much for coming. Cheers.